وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. The concept that I'm going to talk about this morning within the series of Tazkiyah pearls is the concept of Haya and what is generated from it as a value. And Haya as a concept or as an ethic or as a value, however you want to look at it, as it can be seen in different ways, is the representation of Islam. The Prophet ﷺ tells us, "Inna likulli dinin khuluqa wa khuluqul Islam al-haya." Every faith has an ethic or a value that represents it in its core, and Islam is represented by the concept of haya. It is the true representation of Islam, and it's the main ethic that exists within our deen. And if you go and follow along the word in the Prophet ﷺ's traditions, you'll find that ﷺ will say, "Al-haya la ya'ti illa bi khair." Haya only brings good things. الإيمان بضع وستون أو بضع وسبعون شعبة أعلاها كلمة لا إله إلا الله وأدناها إماطة الأذى عن الطريق والحياء شعبة من الإيمان. He points out عليه الصلاة والسلام that there are different rankings or levels within Iman, and that's a concept that I'm not going to be able to actually cover within this series, unfortunately. But Iman is ranked, and the highest aspect of Iman is understanding truly what La ilaha illallah means. And the simplest or the lowest is just removing something harmful from the street that may harm someone else. And Haya is a shu'bah from Iman. Haya is its own subdivision of Iman. And he points it out, alayhi salatu wasalam, because of what it's capable of doing, because of its importance within our deen. And Haya is not being ashamed or being shy or being bashful or being an introvert. That's not what Haya means at all. And that's not what it leads to either. But because sometimes the representation of Haya or the practice of Haya turns into someone lowering their voices and being a bit respectful, it is often understood that way, but that's not what it is. The best way to understand the word, and this is important because you're going to see why. There's a hook to all of this, of why Haya is important to talk about within Tazkiyah. Because Haya is the combination of two things. It's awareness and sensitivity. When you are aware of yourself and you're aware of others, you have awareness of what's happening around you, and you're sensitive to the needs that are existing because of that level of awareness, then you will act accordingly. And that is what Haya is. It's the combination of these two things. And I'll give you an example, a quick one. Just if someone's older, sitting in a majlis, and there is a kid there, and this person says, "Well, I'm thirsty," or for example, he sneezes, right, and there's no tissue. Now the kid will just sit there, right? And what a parent will later on tell him, you'll use this term. Like you'll use this term even in the Middle East. They'll use it not even knowing how accurate it is or understanding exactly how precise their terminology is. It just comes off naturally. Now, you have no haya. Well, what is it about this that doesn't haya? It's a lack of awareness. He said he was thirsty. You should be aware of what's going on, and then sensitive. Well, if they're thirsty and there's no water, maybe I go get. Or someone sneezes, there's no tissue box. Immediately, okay, where is it? That's haya because you're aware. It's the epitome of life. Haya is the epitome of being alive. That's the meaning of the word, just so you understand in Arabic what the word means. Haya is taken from the root of life, hayat, haya. That's where it's taken from. The derivative with the alif and hamza at the end is how you take a concept and epitomize it. Talk about the peak level of it. So for example, the sumu is being high, right? So what's the highest thing? As-sama'. Right, because you just add that, and that exists almost for everything in Arabic. I just add the alif hamza, and then you make it you epitomize it. So haya, being alive. So what is the highest level of being alive? Al-haya. That's what haya is. And what's the difference really between someone who's alive and someone who is dead? The difference is that dead people aren't aware of their surroundings. They're not aware, and they're not sensitive to anything. You can poke at them all day; they won't move. They won't budge, they won't respond, they won't do anything. And someone who's alive is aware, is sensitive and will respond to what's happening around them. That's the main difference. That is the main, for us at least, in this dunya, the main difference between living and dying is that, and there's no comparison at all, because the dead person has no response. He has no awareness of what's happening around them. And they have no sensitivity to the needs of others because they're not there anymore. So when we talk about, okay, what's the epitome of life, of being alive, it's the ability to function in those two ways. Once you don't do that, once you lose awareness and you lose sensitivity, well, what's the difference between that person and someone who's already dead? There's really no difference anymore. Well, no, but I'm breathing. Yeah, that's for you. That's just, on your own level. You're breathing and you're thinking, you're doing your own thing. But you don't really exist. You're not a part of the world that you're living in anymore because you're not capable of performing the two basic functions of life, which is being aware of your surroundings and being sensitive to those surroundings and then responding to them, which is why this is such an important thing. He says, alayhi salatu wasalam, إِذَا إِنَّ مِمَّا أَدْرَكَ النَّاسُ مِنْ كَلَامِ النُّبُوَّةِ الْأُولَى إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحِ فَاصْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ. Amongst that which people still have today from the wordings of previous prophecies, like the old, like ancient wisdom, the wisdom of Sheeth alayhi salam, son of Adam, the wisdom of Ibrahim alayhi salam, that if you have no haya, then you will do whatever. And there's nothing that you can't do. And there's nothing that you won't do. Because you have no haya, because you have no awareness, because you're not sensitive at all to your surroundings. So you could do anything, really. There's nothing holding you back. Because the only thing that regulates our behavior, really, in this world, is that peace. Now, why is this important? Why is this so important? Well, Haya generates every other good ethic in Islam. Everything is generated by Haya. You can generate it all from Haya. When we talked about humbleness, for example, we talked about compassion, we'll talk about loyalty, we'll talk about honesty and other things. All of these ethics are easily generated by Haya. If you have Haya, everything else just works. It just exists on its own. In order for you to be compassionate, for example, or to show rahmah, you have to be aware of people. You have to be sensitive to their needs. If you are, then you will have compassion towards them because you're noticing that they are struggling or they are in pain or they are similar to you or they may have some challenges ahead of them. If you're sensitive towards their challenges, then you will show them tenderness and you'll show them compassion. If you are aware of people and you're aware of yourself, then you will conclude that there are no differences, that we are actually exactly equal, and there's really no one's better than anyone else. And if you're sensitive to people's stories, then you have no reason to think you're better than them because you're sensitive to the fact that they are similarly to you, also struggling in life, and they also, when they make mistakes, just like you, it's an issue of a shortcoming or a lack of focus. So you can't be arrogant if you're sensitive to people's stories and how they live their lives, etc., etc., etc. It's not difficult to take any ethic and explain, well, how does Haya will conclude it. It is that powerful. And there's no cap to it. And that's the point that you have to understand. There is no cap to Haya. You see, every other ethic, we have to regulate it. Every other ethic must be regulated. We have to regulate rahmah. If we don't regulate rahmah, I have to talk to you about the fact that there is a baseline. You cannot dip under this. And we have to talk about that sometimes rahmah will be strictness. So I have to regulate rahmah for you. I have to explain how and how much you need, what dose you need to use it. And when it has to present itself a little bit differently so that you don't end up not capable of benefiting other people or you give them that which harms them in the long run. Same thing goes for humbleness. I have to regulate the pendulum for you. If I don't regulate it, you swing it in one direction, you have low self-esteem, you feel less than people. No, we need to keep it right in the middle. Except Haya. Out of all of the ethics and values, there's no cap to it. The more, the better. The more, the better. Just keep on piling Haya. There's no cap, there's no end to how good you can become. The more aware you are, the more sensitive you are, the better you are. Everything you're going to have to cap. And in Tazkiyah, we have to talk about exceptions to every rule. You have to point out where it may present itself a little bit differently, where you have to be aware of how, if you don't understand this appropriately, it can backfire and harm you, except when we talk about Haya. Because Haya does not require a cap. It's the only one that you can just keep on adding. Just keep on adding to it. The more Haya, the better. The more Haya, the better. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ says, Haya la ya'ti illa bi khair. Haya only brings good things. It only brings good things. Because that's the reality of what it is as an ethic and a value. It is not passive aggressiveness. And this is an important pitfall. Having haya does not mean that you're passive aggressive. Haya does not mean that you bottle things up. Haya does not mean that you're bottling things up. You're allowing yourself to get disgruntled and upset. And because you have haya, because you're sensitive towards people, you will speak in a way that does not hurt their feelings, but you're kind of implying a little bit. You're implying an under the belt jab. No, that's not haya. If you end up being passive aggressive, if you end up implying harm when you speak, if you end up feeling that you are bottling up a certain degree of anger on the inside, then you're not practicing haya appropriately. This is when you're being polite. You're being polite. That's fine. And that politeness is holding you back from saying what you want to say. That's has nothing to do with haya. It's a social regulation where you're expected not to be able. And this is a problem we have in this country. People are extremely passive aggressive. Extremely passive aggressive. Like beyond, I've never seen anything like it. Wallahi. It's a social phenomenon that's worthy of studying and writing papers on and dissertations. It's absolutely insanely. The amount of passive aggressiveness that exists within Canada is, I think, probably the highest in the globe. People are extremely passive aggressive because there's a lack of understanding of what politeness, what haya means. I think it started and stemmed in the concept of haya, but I don't think it continued to be that. Now it's just an aspect of people will smile in your face as they behind your back absolutely try and destroy you. As the monster on the inside is brought up just when you're not looking, that's all. But in your face, it's all politeness, and that's not helpful at all. That's not helping. I'd rather the Middle Eastern form of it, where people are yelling at you in your face. I mean, all of it is wrong, but at least this is honest. At least I know what I'm getting. At least you have expressed how you actually feel, so I know how to deal with it. Because passive aggressiveness means that you're just waiting for someone is preparing for you a nice surprise that's going to come later, that you otherwise had no idea that was going to be the case, because you don't know that, you're not aware that you offended them, you don't know. So passive aggressiveness is not haya. Haya is just make sure that you're able to differentiate between the two. Because what it is your ability to be aware of other people and sensitive towards their needs. So this is how you have to imagine someone who has haya. Someone who's always scanning. He's aware of where he stands from people and where people stand from him. We're aware. We know exactly where we fit and where others are and what's happening and where I am. You're aware of what this place is and what this time is and who these people are. And you're sensitive to the fact that they may have needs or that you may be affecting them in a certain way. And because of that sensitivity, you're making certain decisions and you're responding to that. That's why haya represents itself, or presents in everything. It presents itself in the way that you speak, in the way that you walk, in the way that you do everything. It represents itself in the way you dress. And I think that's where we've kind of reduced it. We've reduced haya to something to do with the dress code. That's how we teach haya in the way you dress. And it's not wrong. Haya does represent itself in your dress code, but it's not reduced to that. And if you reduce it to that, you're ruining, it's a butchering of probably the most important ethic that we have in Islam. And we're reducing it to one thing. Well, why does it present itself in the dress code? Well, because when you're aware of yourself, you're aware of your physical existence, and you're aware of the physical existence of others, and you're sensitive to the fact that my physical being affects other people. The way I dress affects them. It affects how this society functions. It affects how they feel about themselves, how they feel about me, how they're able to move. So I dress in a certain way. And when I dress in that certain way, it's based on that. It's based on the fact that I'm aware of what physical appearances do to others and what my physical appearance is to others. And then I will be sensitive. I'll respond to that, and I make sure I cover up. I show some degree of modesty. And that's a very good way to. There's nothing wrong with understanding. But all it is it's the manifestation of haya in dress code. That's all it is. It's just one manifestation of haya in dress code. But haya is way bigger than that. And the reason comes from an understanding. It's just understanding how do I affect other people in the way that I look? Of course I do. Do I exist alone, or do I exist with people around me? Of course I exist with people around me. So that existence means that I have to be aware and I have to be sensitive to it, so I make certain choices. And then it goes into everything else. into everything else, in the way that I present myself publicly and how I speak and how everything. You're going to find that haya exists in it in the same way. Why is haya of this degree of importance? Because haya generates one thing that is absolutely critical. It generates, from it comes adab. From it comes etiquette. And etiquette is the door to receiving from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala His rahmah, is the door to receiving from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala His knowledge, is the door of acceptance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Without adab, you will receive nothing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With lack of adab, the doors are all closed. The doors are all closed. You will get nothing from Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. There has to be a certain degree of etiquette. And before I explain it, the Prophet ﷺ, as Abdullah ibn Busr tells us, كان إذا أتى باب قوم لم يستقبل بابهم وإنما ورى يمينا أو ورى شمالا يقول السلام عليكم. If he came to a door, he never knocked at the door and stood in front of the door. He stood to the right or he stood to the left, saying Assalamu alaikum, so he wouldn't bother the people on the other side of the door would know that someone said. He would never stand there looking, so when the door opens, he sees what's on the inside. He looks right or left. قال يقول ما عاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم طعاما قط إن اشتهاه أكله وإن لم يشتهيه تركه. He never in his life عليه الصلاة والسلام said one negative thing about food, about any piece of food, ever. He never ever said anything negative about a piece of food ever. If he likes it, he eats it. If he doesn't like it, he leaves it. Never does he say anything negative عليه الصلاة والسلام. كان يقول عليه الصلاة والسلام في حديث أبو داود إن السمت الصالح والاقتصاد والهدي جزء من 25 جزءا من النبوة. السمت الصالح والهدي والاقتصاد, which are the aspects of etiquette, that these are a part of 25 parts of prophecy. Like prophecy, 1 out of 25 of prophecy is having this basic adab. Why is this so important? Well, because we're told certain things about this. We're told certain things about the adab. And you need to have adab ma Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You need to have adab ma Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You have to have adab regarding your deen and adab with people around you. So what do we know about this that's so important? Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. I'll give you an example so you understand. لا ترفعوا أصواتكم فوق صوت النبي ولا تجهروا له بالقول كجهر بعضكم لبعض أن تحبط أعمالكم. That's where you stop. So, all those who believe, don't raise your voices above the voice of the Prophet ﷺ. So when you're speaking, when he's there, you have to make sure that you keep your voice lower than his voice ﷺ. Don't, even if you're arguing, even if you're discussing, you have to, it's adab, it's an issue of adab. You can't raise your voice above his voice ﷺ. وَلَا تَجْهَرُوا لَهُ بِالْقَوْلِ كَجَهْرِ بَعْضِكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ. And don't call publicly on him as you would call one another. Like you call your friend, Fulan, Abu Fulan. You don't call the Prophet ﷺ that way. You have to have that. Why? أَن تَحْبَطَ أَعْمَالُكُمْ. Or else your deeds will fall under ihbat. Ihbat means they'll be removed. They'll be destroyed. Now, they will lose efficacy. They won't count anymore. You've done good deeds, but those good deeds are going to be ruined. They're going to be thrown out. You're not going to get any ajr for them. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ إِحْبَاطُ الْعَمَلِ. When there's lack of adab, when there's lack of etiquette, you run the risk of ihbat al-amal, of the good deeds that you've done. Imagine this, good deeds that otherwise would have been accepted. Good deeds that otherwise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have rewarded you for heavily. You would get an immense, a great amount of reward, but that reward is all going to be thrown out. Why? Because of lack of etiquette, because lack of adab. Imam Malik tells us, let me share with you a few points here. قالت لي أمي وأنا صغير بعد أن عممتني قال اذهب إلى ربيعة الرأي فخذ من أدبه قبل علمه. My mother, when I was a kid, she put the imama on my head and she sent me to the scholars ربيعة الرأي rahmatullah alayhi, one of the great tabi'een. So he sent me to him and he told him, go and learn from him and take from his adab before you take from his ilm. Before you learn his knowledge, learn his adab, his etiquette. Look how he carries himself, how he speaks, how he treats people around him. The more haya, the more adab. The more haya you have, the more adab you will have. Learn from him. يقول الإمام ففعلت. So that's what I did. Abdullah ibn Wahab, Imam Misr, the great scholar of Misr, Abdullah ibn Wahab, is Imam Malik's student. This is what he says. يقول لزمت الإمام مالك 20 عاما. I spent 20 years with Imam Malik. فأخذت العلم منه في عام. I learned all of the fiqh that he had in a year. وأخذت الأدب عنه في 19 سنة. I learned his adab in 19 years. ولو قضيتها كلها في الأدب لكان خيرا لي. And if I spent all 20 learning his adab, it would be better for me. يقول عبد الله بن المبارك: نحن إلى قليل من الأدب أحوج منا إلى كثير من العلم. We are in more need of a small amount, a small dose of adab than we are to a lot of knowledge. قال إن الرجل لا ينبل بنوع من العلوم ما لم يزين علمه بالأدب. That a person will not actually benefit from his knowledge, and he will not achieve a high degree with his knowledge unless he has beautified his knowledge with proper adab. Abdullah ibn Salam, ibn Salam, يقول كنت جالسا أمام الكعبة مادا رجلي. He was sitting in front of the Kaaba. He's a scholar. He's one of the scholars of قراءات, and his foot was like this. قال فأتتني امرأة عجوز, and an old lady came to me. فقالت أرجع قدم رجلك, put your foot in. فإنك من أهل العلم. You're a person of knowledge. لا تجالسه إلا بالأدب. When you sit in front of him, you sit with adab. وإلا محى اسمك من ديوان القرب. Or he will delete your name from amongst those who are accepted. سبحانه وتعالى. قال فسحبت رجلي. So I put my foot back in. يقول أبو حنيفة إن والله إن حكايات الصالحين وسيرهم عندي أحب إلي من كثير من العلوم فإنها آداب القوم وأخلاقهم. Abu Hanifa would say, I would prefer to hear the stories of the Salihin and how they live their lives more than I would like to sit and talk about aspects of knowledge and fiqh and halal and haram and all these things, because this tells you the etiquette of those people and their ethics and how they live their lives. Ibn Sirin the Tabi'i, Muhammad ibn Sirin al-Alim رحمه الله عليه الإمام, يقول كان الصحابة يتعلمون الهدي والسمت كما يتعلمون العلم. The Sahaba were more interested in learning the etiquette. I mean, they would talk amongst themselves about the etiquette of how to behave in certain situations more than they would talk about ilm, more than they would just talk about aspects of knowledge. And I can go on for as long as you want. Until you're bored, you can tell me, khalas, enough there. Just go on and on and on and on. Why? Because this is something that is understood by scholars of our deen to be much more important than knowing this is halal. Know how to do it. Know the etiquette that comes with it. Make sure that you know how to carry yourself, that you know how to speak, that you know. لا تجعلوا دعاء الرسول بينكم كدعاء بعضكم بعضا. Don't call him as you would call other people. It's having the adab with Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam. Having the adab with Allah, knowing how to make dua. It's not just making dua, it's knowing how to make dua, knowing what is appropriate to be said and what's not appropriate to be said. How you speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what wording you use. This takes time. You have to learn the adab of the salihin, the adab of the ulama, and how to speak with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is seen as appropriate, what is seen as respectful, and what is not. Or else you're making dua and you could be saying things that are of extreme, are lacking of adab. There's su adab ma Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a lack of etiquette in how you're speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the amal yuhbat. Which is why the salihin would say, if you don't know, then just say whatever the Quran says. رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا وَهَبْ لَنَا رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا. Just say these things because you run the risk of saying something that has lack of adab in it, and then you're in trouble. It is the door that opens to you all of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's generosity. With a little bit of adab, and even in life, Allah has the exalted example, but even in life, you are more likely to help someone who presents to you with adab than someone who presents to you with lack of it. There are different people who will ask questions or reproach you for services or for aid in different ways. Some will do it with a very heightened degree of haya and a clear approach with etiquette in it. And others won't. You are more likely to want to serve the person who has etiquette, who has haya, who has adab, than you are the person who doesn't. The person who is belligerent, and the person who has no respect, has no sensitivity towards you, does not see that your time. Every once in a while, for the fun of it, I just share with people some of the messages I get, and some of the things that I receive. Maybe it's a number I don't know calls me a few times. I don't answer numbers I don't know. And then I get a message that is of a degree of anger that is almost unparalleled. There's lack of adab in this. Why? Because there's lack of seeing that. Okay, maybe this person is this a person that you're. I don't know if everyone sees like people who have to be human beings, where we have actually lives and time and things that we're busy with. Khalas, I have a question, I have a need, I need it to be answered now. What's your job? Why are you here? You need to do. That's the lack of adab. It's lack of adab. No, this is not how it's approached at all. That's not how things. You don't approach anyone else like that, and it's not appropriate to approach people like that. And I get to see it because, subhanAllah, it's a part of this experience that I go through. But also in terms of how we respond to people, there's also supposed to be a certain degree of adab. And if everyone used a certain degree of etiquette in how they dealt with one another, then doors would open. SubhanAllah, we talk about it opening doors with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Adab opens doors for you with everyone around you. People are more likely to serve you. People are more likely to help you. People are more likely to, they like you immediately when you present with a certain degree of adab in the way that you speak to them. Without adab, every ikhtilaf turns into a khilaf. Without adab, every difference of opinion turns into a rift within our ummah. Turns into division amongst people. Because there's no adab. When Islam is designed to have more than one opinion on a lot of things. Islam is designed to have different walks of life within it. It's a wide river, and people are swimming in different lanes. And this ikhtilaf is a part of our deen. It's embedded, it's designed. Islam is designed to have this, by design, not by mistake. It's not because the Prophet ﷺ is not here. We don't know No, this is by design, that Islam is going to have more than one way of looking at things within it. It's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared it for us. If you say anything else, then basically you are saying that Islam did not arrive to us fully, that it arrived missing. Things are missing. It didn't make it to us appropriately. But no, this is by design. Idbahu baqara. There's different types. Any baqara would have worked. As long as it wasn't a donkey, any baqara would have functioned. As long as there's different types of baqara, old and young and different colors and different. Doesn't matter. Any baqara would have. Yes, there's one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the most, but all of them would be fine. And our deen is designed that way. So when there's no adab, there's no way for us to actually differ without causing a rift between us, without severing our relationships. It's adab that allows us to disagree and continue to work with one another. And this is just one of many other benefits that we take away from adab. And it all comes back to haya. It comes back to that sensitivity, that ability to be aware of your surroundings and sensitive. I'm going to give you an example so you understand, so this is clear to you. The Prophet ﷺ used to make istighfar 100 times a day. So one of the exercises I give people is I tell them, okay, make istighfar for 50 sins. Right? Make istighfar, don't do 100, do 50. Do astaghfirullah today 50 times, but make istighfar from 50 separate sins. So they sit down and they start writing. They make it up to 10. Most people, maybe 20. They write 20 sins, and that's it. They can't think of anything else. So mashallah, that's all they've got. We are a bunch of angels walking, mashallah. 20 sins is as far as we can go. And we've done this many, many times. And if anyone in my Tazkiyah halaqat, no. 25, I can't make any more. You can't think of more than 20? No, I can't. That's all I've got. MashaAllah. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You could think of 1,000, but you can't think of 25. It's not the fact that you don't have sin. It's the fact that you lack sensitivity. You see, for the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, if he did not achieve a certain degree of hudur ma'allah in Salat al-Fajr fi jama'ah, he would put that down as something he has to seek repentance from. For you, if you prayed Fajr just on time, you're happy. Right? So the fact that you didn't pray in the masjid you didn't recognize that as a sin. It's just a lack of sensitivity. You're not sensitive to your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you don't see many things as shortcomings. You don't see many mistakes or many pitfalls or lack of focus as a sin. But the more sensitive you become with your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more you start noticing the small, this is a sin. Oh, I should have done this better. I could have done that more. You wake up in the morning, you prayed Fajr, you're happy. So what you consider to be a good deed, the Prophet ﷺ would consider to be a sin. He didn't make it for Fajr, a'udhu billah. He didn't wake up for Qiyam al-Layl, a'udhu billah, musibah. This is a horrible day. How could he? This is a sinful day that he's going to spend the rest of his day mustaghfir because he didn't wake up. Qiyam al-Layl is not even on the agenda. It's not even on the agenda. Qiyam al-Layl. If I wake up for Fajr before the sun comes up, I'm happy. So it's not an issue that you can't think of 25 sins. It's the fact that you just aren't sensitive. So the more sensitivity that you have, the more haya from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more you can, your maneuvering changes. Your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes. It's not about being ashamed. It's not about being an introvert. Or there's nothing wrong with being an introvert, but that's not what haya is. It's not about being quiet and being embarrassed and not being able to speak up. No, no, no. All of that is fine. All of that is fine. It's just having that awareness of where you stand from Allah, where you stand from people, where you stand from your deen, and feeling sensitive to the needs and to what you should have been doing, and then responding to that appropriately. And that will result into adab. And adab is the door. It's the key to the door. You have to have that key so you can open the door, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can send upon you His rahmah, send upon you. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam tells us, Ahl al-Jannah, kullu hayyinin, sahlin, layyinin. When he talks about Ahl al-Jannah, it's every person who is of ease, every person who is easygoing, who is kind, who is not difficult, who has humble. وَأَهْلُ النَّارِ كُلُّ جَوَّاضٍ عُتُلٍ مُتَكَبِّرٍ. Every person who is difficult, who lacks etiquette, who lacks appropriateness and how they speak to others. He says, alayhi salatu wasalam, min husni islami al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi. Amongst the signs of good Islam of a person is that they leave that which they're none of their business. It's adab. It's just knowing what to speak about, what to interject yourself in, what to project yourself upon, what to interject upon, what to leave. I'll end with this. All of the descriptions we have of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's face come from children, come from Ali ibn Abi Talib, come from Anas ibn Malik, come from Sahaba Abdullah ibn Amr, the Sahaba who would sit there as children and look at him alayhi salatu wasalam and memorize his face. We don't have descriptions that come from the older generation. Why? Because كانوا أدبا لا ينظرون إلى وجه رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام إلا شزرة إلا لحظات. They wouldn't dare stare at his face عليه الصلاة والسلام. They would look up for a moment and look down out of adab with him عليه الصلاة والسلام. Out of adab, they wouldn't sit there and stare at his face عليه الصلاة والسلام because of his maqam, because of his status. So they would look and they would look down out of adab because they would be ashamed to stare at him that way. But the children didn't. The children didn't care because they're children. So all of the descriptions come from children. All of the descriptions I have about him, alayhi salatu wasalam, they're kids. People who at the time were very young. Does you remember? But the older Sahaba, they don't describe him ever, alayhi salatu wasalam. Out of adab. كان إذا تكلم عليه الصلاة والسلام, the hadith all have the same thing. كأن على رؤوسهم الطير. It's as if they were trying to keep a wild bird on their heads. Like they don't even move. They wouldn't even move out of adab with him, alayhi salatu wasalam. And this has nothing to do with the person in front of you, by the way. Adab is not, if you're understanding what haya is not about others, haya is about you. And adab is also about you, it's not about others. It's not about how people are, it's about how you are. Adab benefits you. Forget about what it does for other people. It benefits you. You're the one who is taking the benefit from this adab. It represents you. How you speak to other people, how you deal with them, how you approach them. This represents you, not them. You can't say, well, I'll show this person adab and not that person not adab. No, no, no. If you do that, we're at the same problem again. We're at the same problem that this is not an ethic, it's not a value, it's a preference. A preference is not important, it doesn't matter. Everyone can perform that. Adab means you're always that way. You don't respect people because they're respectful. You respect people because you're respectful. It's a big difference. It's a big, big difference. If you're picking and choosing who you're going to respect and who you're going to show etiquette towards and who you're not, then you haven't understood it. Al-Haya is something that is based on you, your awareness and your sensitivity. And because of that, you have generated now an etiquette that is based on who you are. So you're projecting to the world who you are, not the opposite. And that's what I wanted to share with you regarding Haya. Haya is a very, very important topic, and it generates something that's even more important. That learning Islam, understanding your deen, and being worthy of receiving, being a recipient of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and love and waridat and madad and khair, to receive all of the khair from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to be able to open the door. And the key to that door is having appropriate adab. I'll end with that. Subhanallah bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka wa 'azzama ala nabiyyina wa habibina wa qurrati a'yunina Muhammadin wa ala alihi